was circulated in advance and printed copies are available. The clerk shall designate the bill.
H.R. 5567, a bill to prohibit elementary and secondary schools from accepting funds from or entering into contracts with the government of the People's Republic of China and the Chinese Communist Party and for other purposes.
Without objection, the bill will be considered as read and open for amendment at any point, and any amendment offered shall be considered as read. Does anyone seek to be recognized? Mr. Williams, for what purpose do you seek recognition?
Madam Chair, I have an amendment of the desk titled H5567_ANS.
The clerk will designate the amendment in the nature of a substitute.
Amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 5567 offered by Mr. Williams of New York. Identifier H5567_ANS.
Without objection, the amendment shall be considered original text for purposes of further amendment. The amendment in the nature of a substitute has already been distributed. I now recognize Congressman Williams for 5 minutes to explain the amendment in the nature of a substitute.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm proud to offer this amendment in the nature of a substitute to the Combating the Lies of Authoritarians in School Systems Act, a bill that will tackle the pervasive influence of foreign funding in our K-12 system. Only by increasing transparency in our schools' funding streams will we be able to counter malicious influence in our education. The threat that unaccountable foreign funding poses to the next generation is well documented. Adversarial countries that wish to promote their un-American values in the classrooms of our children have long abused U.S. laws that allow them to exert influence through shady financial contributions to public institutions. Recently, this has materialized in pro-Hamas rhetoric reaching the classrooms of schools in places like New York City. Turns out, over $1 million over 3 years was sent from the Qatar Foundation International to the New York City Department of Education. Just last year, in this very committee, we heard about $17 million sent to 143 school districts and private K-12 schools nationwide from Confucius classrooms, a proxy of the Confucius Institutes, which is the CCP entity that is used to exert soft power. We cannot allow such close proximity between the Chinese Communist Party and our nation's young people. I know firsthand the evils of authoritarianism. I'm the only member of Congress that was in Tiananmen Square in May of 1989, and I spoke with student protesters there about their standing up to the oppressive Chinese Communist Party system. Just months later, dozens of those students would be massacred by their own government, along with many more. It is more important than ever that the education of our children remains free from the totalitarian lies that leads a society to this point. Our nation's students should be free to learn without the threat of foreign influence. When foreign governments line the pockets of American administrators, our children feel the impact, and our future hangs in the balance. The Class Act establishes transparency regarding contributions from foreign sources exceeding $10,000, that they be disclosed to the Secretary of Education, which shall include the name and country of origin of the foreign source, the amount of the funds, and the details of any contract entered into. I'm proud of the committee's work on this necessary issue and recommend my colleagues to vote in favor of its passage. Madam Chair, I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. For what purpose does Congresswoman Bonamici seek recognition?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move to strike the last word in opposition to H.R. 5567 and the amendment in the nature of a substitute.
You're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This bill, again, runs the risk of fueling culture wars and anti-Asian sentiment while doing nothing to protect or enrich children or enhance their learning outcomes. I cannot stress this enough. There is no evidence demonstrating that public elementary and secondary schools are receiving donations from or entering into dangerous contracts with foreign sources. If school funding is an issue, we should be talking about increasing funding through ESEA Title I, for example. H.R. 5567 would impose significant administrative burdens on schools by requiring intensive monitoring and frequent disclosures. This would force school administrators to divert attention and resources away from core educational activities and priorities. The compliance requirements may overwhelm schools, particularly those with limited administrative capacity. Even unintentional noncompliance would hurt students because federal financial assistance would be stripped away, even if a mistake was unintentional. And the bill contains no funding to assist with the administrative burdens that compliance would require. Also, H.R. 5567 and the amendment in the nature of the substitute do not mention the roles of local and state agencies in enforcing the disclosure and subsequent consequences for noncompliance. Typically, those entities distribute federal financial assistance after they receive funds from the Department of Education. So this bill is an example of poorly planned legislation that, if executed, would create more problems than it solves. Schools may end partnerships or be hesitant to collaborate with foreign organizations for language and exchange programs because of fear of losing federal funding. Limiting education exchanges undermines efforts to prepare American students to navigate and contribute to a global society and a global economy. It reduces their exposure to critical international perspectives and language skills needed to succeed as they develop careers. In fact, a study by the U.S. Committee on Economic Development found that American businesses lose at least $2 billion every year because of language or cultural misunderstandings. More than 70 government agencies have reported a need for individuals with foreign language expertise. And the General Accounting Office suggested that such shortages have adversely affected agency operations, hindered U.S. military, law enforcement, intelligence, counterterrorism, and diplomatic efforts. And speaking of the GAO, I want to reiterate that according to the GAO, at the end of 2023, nearly all U.S. Confucius Institutes have closed. In short, we should be supporting partnerships that make language programs possible, not deterring them. School administrators and local leaders, not the federal government, are best equipped to determine what types of domestic and international partnerships are needed in their districts. This committee should not spend time discussing issues that hold American children back, and for these reasons, I urge my colleagues to oppose this bill, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you, Ms. Bonamici. Are there any members who wish to be recognized for further discussion on the amendment in the nature of a substitute? There being no further discussion on the amendment in the nature of a substitute, the committee will move to consideration of amendments. For what purpose does the gentleman from Virginia seek recognition?
Madam Chair, I have an amendment to the desk, H5567, underline AMD 001.